for your indulgence in this committee for at least a positive approval of this unauthorized expenditure, because it was not the entire overspending. Yeah.
See, I know what they will ask you. Consequence management. What was done? I hear the requests about we wrote to Treasury, but what consequence management was effected in responding to this? And that, I can assure you, will be the golden thread in all the departments. We want us to give you 8.8 million rand from the National Revenue Fund. What action steps did the department take then, so that we can bring this to a logical conclusion? Minister say Khalel Simzwil. What consequences? I think let's be pointed. So I said, how did you deal with this? Were there any actions taken? None. If not, why not? And so on. Take us through that, so that we can see the extent of your own seriousness about curbing this. So I think that's where we are, colleagues. Unless I think that's really where we are. There has to be a rational justification on the request that you are making for us to authorize this.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, unfortunately, there were no consequence management. There was none. There was no investigation. And yeah, there was nothing that was done in terms of that unauthorized expenditure.
Somyo, Honorable Hatebe, Mazaman, in that order, and then Minister, you will come in and they will give a full set of questions, and then you can come in with responses. Colleagues, in that order, please.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning to the Minister and Ministry and other ministers present. You know, the difficulty goes into the angle which the Chair has taken. Because if you come to this level and you want to guard against reoccurrence of similar instances, it might not be in the same division, might be somewhere else. There must be cause for acting outside the prescribed authorizing guide, because if you look into the observation of the government gazette at the time, which authorizes such kind of engagements, the section was way outside the prescription. So it tells you that the responsibility of an authority of the accounting officers in the instance of realizing this expenditure indicates some form of a lapse of some kind. How would you want to deal with this kind? Have you set up controls which are seeking to say, going forward, something of this nature won't recur? And what are those kind of controls going forward, so that tomorrow you don't come back and you slip into the same situation? Yes, the expenditure took place at some stage. It might be during your time or outside your own time period, but as the authority there, what sort of things that you would want to say to us, at least having observed these are the mechanisms that we have set getting forward? Because it looks like you can easily in that department move outside the rules and do whatever that would say. So coming to this kind of a plea platform, what is it that you have done since that time?
Honorable Hadebe, let's take a full set of questions. Honorable Hadebe, and then Honorable Liz. Then we'll hand over to the Minister and DG.
Thank you, Chair. I'm partly covered by Honorable Somio. This reminds me of the story in the Bible. Unyana ulahleko, when he decided to come back, he confessed his sin. Wathi baba ngonile phambi kobuso bakho, ngifanelanga ngokubizwa ngokuthi ngumntanakho. I was expecting the same from you, and give us the characterization of this expenditure. What the Treasury is saying is that the unauthorized expenditure incurred by the department was avoidable. I did not hear that from your part. How do you characterize this? You just give us a justification, but you are not characterizing as something that shouldn't have happened, and advice was given and not adhered to, even if it was before your time. But there is some sort of a report that will demonstrate that indeed people appearing before us, they understand the gravity and the nature of what caused the unauthorized expenditure, and they are characterizing it correctly to say this shouldn't have happened, this could have been avoided. Moving forward, these are the steps and internal controls in place to ensure that such thing does not occur in future. These are the steps to alert the powers that be that for future, if you intend incorporating one or two things outside the parameters of the law, you should take these measures into account, failing which these are the consequences. Hence, I was referring you to Unyana Ulahleko. He understood that taking money and leaving home, coming back and asana nix, he ought to first confess and agree and ask forgiveness. So that's the characterization that I'm not hearing from your side. Thank you so much, Chair.
Honorable Liz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the prodigal son is a good lesson to learn, but the question here really is building on what Honourable Somia and Hadebe have already raised in terms of consequence. And you, who was the DG at that time, and where is that person now? Is he or she still employed somewhere in the state apparatus? And why are you not taking action against that person? So we need the name. Where are they now? And why are you not taking action? Why a minister should require 25 advisors when the law already allows 16, it boggles the mind, but that's a political issue. The legal issue rests with the accounting officer, and I'd like to know who that DG was at the time and why you're not chasing after them.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's get, and I think there'll have to be clarity on what the CFO is saying. See, when you say there's been no consequence management and no investigations, that's a problem. Because you see, Honorable Hadebe's analogy of the prodigal son, the conclusion of that is that at the very least he was welcomed home and a fattened cow was slaughtered. That may not be the case here. So I think the nub of the issue really is there. So Minister and your team, let's send over to you.
Okay, no, thank you, Honorable Chairperson. maybe let me first allow them to come in, because some of the matters or the questions involve more the administrative act, because mine would be more a forward-looking approach.
Understandable, Minister. DG?
Thank you, Chairperson. I think there was a question on what have we done what have we done going forward after this incident. I think what I can highlight to the committee is that we have some of the interventions that have been put in the department, including the fact that we have program managers who are appointed and have responsibility over budget. So in the ministry, we have a program manager who has responsibility over the budget in the ministry, and we do tracking of spending, and we have our budget committee meetings that meet on a quarterly basis, where the different program managers report and assist with the tracking of the budget and spending. We also have, with our regulations currently, we also have provided for the advisory committee in the regulations, and I think one of the important issues is that this advisory committee was paid outside of the rates that are defined in terms of the rates that we pay in the public service, which are defined by Treasury and DPSA, which is the consulting rates. They were paid outside of those, but we have ensured when we appoint advisors, people in the advisory committee, that it must be for a shorter period and it must be for specific responsibilities, and payment must be within the consulting fees that are defined in the I've just forgotten the name of the document, but in the rates that are published by Treasury and DPSA. We have, for instance...
That's the question. I think what we try... That's all elementary. Question is why, and what did you do about it? Why were they paid outside the defined rates? Okay. Where was that decision taken? Because it goes to what Honorable Liz is saying about where that DG is. It goes to what Honorable Hateb is saying when he quotes what this was avoidable. So I think we are familiar with the crime, but it's nuanced details, because, like I'm saying, it can't be a blank check. So why were they? Well, if no investigation has been done, then you're unable to answer those questions.
From the reports I've seen, yes, Chair, I'm unable to answer that question because there's no investigations that have been done, and I was not in the department at the time. But from some of the paperwork I've seen in the department had given an advice in terms of this decision to appoint, but in the ministry the advice was not taken. So there is paperwork, there's submissions that the department had also given advice in terms of this particular matter. There was a question on who was the DG at the time. I don't want to expose my colleague, but DG Dipufa is here. He was a DG at the time at the department, but I think he has some explanation to do on his own, because I tried to speak to him before we started, and he indicated some of the challenges he faced at the time. But Chairperson, I think he had some explanation. He's no longer in the department now. He's with Traditional Affairs, and so it's quite useful that we are sharing the platform today, because now I can, I think, hide behind him. Thank you.
Sorry. Please work with us and assist us. If you say advice was given, we don't know what advice was it. Okay, so for us to be able to justify whatever decision that we might take, we need to consider all factors at play and what transpired at that time. So I would appeal, if an advice was given, what was the advice?
Thank you, Chair. This is the best.
And what was the response from the advice given?
This is the best man to take over, Chair. Thank you.
Delegators, you don't fit digit, no problem.
Thanks, Chair. I think from our side, from finance side, we had indicated on numerous occasions when these appointments were done, because they were not done at once of the 9 people. So we had indicated that there's no budget available for this. This is not budgeted for. And that's the advice that obviously as a CFO you'd give, but the process goes forward. There's a decision making that after you've given the advice. So obviously the advice was not yet adhered to. But again, I want
Chairman,
to indicate.
who made those decisions?
How long have you been CFO?
Sorry?
How long have you been the CFO?
Since 2011.
Yes, yeah. We're making progress. See?
I think one thing that I wanted to just highlight, we do accept that it was wrong from the department side, that a decision like that to appoint people outside the PFMA requirements, which is budgeted, because what you need to do is you can't commit the department before there are resources available. So it was wrong to do that. But obviously the advice was not adhered to. We had indicated that there's no budget available.
No, all right. We get that. You advised. Colleagues, we see we're going to go around in circles. And what I don't want is to have an ad hoc investigation of this matter, because the DG of Traditional Affairs is here. He was DG then, but I don't think it would be correct for him to respond now. I think let's do this on this matter. We're going to suspend DPSA and we'll give you 30 days to go back and investigate this and provide a portfolio of evidence in terms of the material circumstances of what took place and what happened here and where the advice was not taken. That will give you time to confer with that former DG, because he's still in the state's employ. But what I don't want is for us to sort of have them now here toing and froing. That would not be a professional outlook. So that he can provide his own submissions and explanations in the consultations that we have done. So by the time we conclude on this report, DPSA must have submitted to us in writing the full set. The CFO was there, so he is going to have some of the nuanced details, because what we are trying to avoid is a precedence that just willy-nilly authorizes unauthorized expenditure. You've made a request that this be taken from the revenue fund, but I'm not getting a sense that there's a departmental investigation which brings this to a conclusion in terms of a concrete portfolio, because consequences are important. And Mazambane keeps on saying, every time you say it was not taken, he says, by who? So he's asked it 3 times now, and that's important. So colleagues, I think because the issue is very specific, we know where the problem was. It's around the advisory board, so it's not a complicated investigation. And the fact that it's not been done, you see, I asked Stombi to pull out the 2016 notes, and the same issue arose. Where's the investigation? Where's the investigation? Investigate the matter. Honorable Hadebe.
I like to pay attention to details. When you're saying you had advised by saying it's not budgeted for, you are not discouraging them from appointment. Was the advice to say, yes, it's not budgeted for, therefore we advise you not to appoint? Then it's a different case. But if your advice was only, we did not budget for this, I would go around and look for money. And then you can't accuse me of saying, yeah, you can't accuse me of not taking your advice. You just alerted me to the fact that there's no money. So was your advice to say do not appoint, or it's not budgeted for?
Let that be answered if you can, but put it in there. That's an important question. What was the nature of the advice? because it could have very well been, no, continue, we'll find money. Right? Let's get that, and then I think we'll give the Minister an opportunity for concluding remarks. We've got 30 days to bring this to us.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the culture or the way we work in the department, once we say there's no budget for it, we are advising the accounting officer. If we say there's no budget, but we would indicate we will find money from this, we'll give an option. But when we say we don't have budget for it, we are saying we stop.
That's fine. Let's not have the ad hoc investigation. Minister, any concluding remarks?
No, thanks, Chair. Let me indicate upfront that this wouldn't recur because the current arrangements are that anything that is outside what is prescribed, that is any deviation by any executive authority must go through the ministry, that is the Minister of Public Service. And currently we do indicate to departments where the checks and balances are that there must be budget for what you are requesting, and if there is a deviation, there must be reasons justifiable enough for that to happen. And therefore the current setup in terms of recurrence is quite strengthened in terms of the regulations and directives that are currently operational. I do like the question that says the nature of the advice, because when I say to them, say to me, the implications of doing X, of approving this are, they always forget. I must send it back to say implications, please. So I'm saying at times there's no amount of regulations that will substitute the political will to do the right thing. And therefore, in as much as this is administrative, but it also has this political will to have done the correct thing. But we will go back to finalize the kind of questions that the members have put forward, and we'll come back. I would make the appeal that we do need to have these matters off our table, whichever way we decide on them, but it can't be correct to have a matter hanging in the books for 10 years. It's just not right. But thank you for the opportunity, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, last one, 30 seconds.
No, Chair. You know, the power on any expense lies on the accounting officer. You see, and while that power lies there, we recognize the fact that at times ministers would force them to do things which are outside that kind of rule. You see, when we sit here, we weigh all those possibilities, but the law must be somewhat observed. So even in yourselves, there must not be creation of an ambiguity in terms of acting around those matters or not acting on them. You see, so whether you're talking about the CFO or the DG, you know, we know that if indeed you're talking about the advisory services which are residing in the minister's office and authority, you must show cause that you have provided an ammunition better for the decisions away from that kind of a decision, so that you are clear on where this thing lies and where your authority would somewhat weigh heavily on the positive line of wanting things not to happen in a way. We are sitting with that kind of a passion which would want to predicate these kinds of instances going forward.
Right, thank you very much. The question is always, is it working days or what? Your deadline is the 20th of October to get that report, because if you are left out of this report, then this matter will go to next year. So we're wanting to conclude this with National Treasury now. So the ball is in your court. And I just want to say, on matters of employment, DPSA must be the North Star. Lead by example. It can't be you. And I'm, of course, very understanding that it's a historic matter. But let's resolve it. So give us that information, and we'll get the report in 30 days. If there's a need for a meeting, we will indicate. If the report suffices, we will proceed and make recommendations. But I think answer all the questions, even the ones we didn't ask. Tell the story like it is. Investigate, and then you can, yeah. Minister, DG and your team, thank you very much. Communications, let's go to if you want to be beaming, just be here for the purposes of presentation. All the upklagaklagas here. This one should be very straightforward. 710,000 rands. Right? This is it, right? Yeah. Okay. DM, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chair, and greetings to the honorable members of SCOPA, ministers, DGs, and all the colleagues who are here this morning. Chair, let me bring you the apology of the minister of our department, who's currently in New York attending the Broadband Commission. And he was also supposed to be part of the delegation to attend UNGA, but he will be making his way back to answer the questions tomorrow in the House in the afternoon. Unfortunately,
colleagues, the minister did phone me, so he did apologize.
Yeah, I would have loved to be here, but unfortunately, Chair is traveling. He's also accompanied by the DG. So I'm with the acting DG, the acting CFO, as well as the acting DDG for administration. No, I'm the deputy minister. Chair, we will be, I think, talking to you about an unauthorized expenditure that happened during the 2013-2014 financial year. The total amount of that expenditure is 4.741 million, which resulted, which was unauthorized as a result of the fluctuation in the exchange rates. So the department belongs to a number of international bodies. So in this instance, there was an overpayment, if you can call it that way, so there was a budget of 14.2 million, of 10.8 million, sorry, to a body that is called the International Telecommunications Union. Eventually what was paid was 14.2 million, which was exceeding what was budgeted for. And we also are affiliate to the Universal Postal Union, for which there was an overpayment of 4.7 million, and the budgeted amount was 3.6 million. And lastly, there was an overpayment to a body called Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which amounted to 416,000 instead of 109,000. So there was this overpayment to these three international bodies as a result of the increase in the interest in the exchange rate. So we sought as a department to regularize this by requesting Treasury. Unfortunately, it was not approved by Treasury, so it remains an unauthorized of that amount of 4.7 million. There was no investigation, there was no consequence management, as it's quite clear that there was no one who was responsible. The issue was beyond anybody. It was the exchange rate which affected. But I'm going to ask the CFO just to make some additional comments if there are any, and then we'll hand over to yourself, Chair. Thank you.
CFO? Still mic?
Okay, let me start again. Thank you, DM, and good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. As per the DM's request, I'll just give a very brief overview. Chair, just to say that within the organization in the 2013-14 financial year, we had a total budget of 2.3 billion rand, and the total expenditure by the end of the 13-14 financial year was 2.3 billion, and the overall saving of 9.3 million rand was the amount that was surrendered to National Treasury by the end of that financial year. If you then look into the programs within the organization or within the vote, Program 1 had a saving of 1.6 million rand. Program 2 is where the over expenditure was reported of 4.7 million. Program 3 had a very small saving of 171,000 rand. And then in Program 4, they had a saving of 12.2 million rand, of which 12 point something million was allocated to international organizations and broadcasters. And that is the only program that actually could assist the other program with the over expenditure. So what then transpired is that the department wrote a request to National Treasury to request that money in the transfer and subsidies in Program 4 be utilized to cover the over expenditure in Program 2. Unfortunately, National Treasury cited the Adjusted Appropriation Act, Section 51A, where it stated that you can only shift transfer to transfer if the purpose is the same. Now, the money that was saved under Program 4 was mainly meant for SABC and program productions to cover the amount over expenditure in international organizations. So the purpose of the two transfers are not the same, and hence Treasury did not approve the request to environment the funds from Program 4 to Program 2. In addition, Treasury indicated that we have to reprioritize within the budget to find the 4.7 million. Now, Chair, unfortunately, the other programs did not have any savings that one could utilize to shift to program 2. And at the end of the year, the 4.7 million stood as unauthorized expenditure. Yeah, so I'm gonna, let me just go to the next slide, Chair, and then if you then look at program 2, you can see that the transfers and subsidies is where the over expenditure was, 4.7 million, and there was literally no other cent within program 2 that could have been utilized to reduce the over expenditure on the transfers and subsidies in program 2. In program 4, that is where there was, this was the only other program that had a saving. Chair, and if you look at the total saving on the transfers and subsidies is at 12.1 million. So there was literally no other funds available to shift to cover that over expenditure within program 2. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to pause there, and then if there are any questions, we can take them. Thanks.
GM?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That will be all. Our plea is to request this committee to condone that unauthorized expenditure. Thank you.
Colleagues, don't mind my blank face. Mabusome?
Thanks, Chair. It appears a straightforward call, though if you are involved in the international space, you'd know what impacts on your expenditure, because the case here could be similar to what you would experience to any entity that realizes its own expenditure through foreign direct investment or payments. You would know and follow the effects of the rand-dollar relationship from time to time, and your own budgeting instrument would have that outlook. So you know, while indeed you would see no one is responsible for this, it's because of the dollar-rand relationship. You know, there would be someone responsible. So if you purely put it that way, it's not correct, because you employ CFOs in these departments. It's their responsibility to have an outlook of that behavior from time to time. If you would follow on the actual stats SA analytics, you'd be able to find that cause, that our expectation would be at this based on the influence of the preoccupation on the economic growth projections. So departments must not lie behind to that kind of scope in terms of looking into their own ability around managing their own budgets one way or the other. So what from sitting from this side, what I really don't appreciate is to say no one is responsible, you see, for such a causal factor. And your investigation should somewhat be at that kind of a forecast view. It happened some time ago, but since indeed the actual eye into it in terms of your own expenditure, you should realize the fact that there is some kind of influence in as far as that dollar rand relationship. Department of Health would experience the same thing in terms of their own purchases on medications, and there would be that kind of predictions in terms of that kind of influence. So you are sleeping in the job, to realize that factor. So the deputy minister buying into the story which says no one was somewhat involved around such, I don't think it's fair. In this instance, you must have the body of financial management which has an outlook on these matters. Otherwise I wouldn't have a problem to look into the Treasury recommendation on the matter. When we deal substantively with this kind of submission. Thanks, Chair.
No, Chair, I'm covered. I'm happy. Yeah.
All right, is the Honourable Liz? All right, do you have any reaction to what Honourable Somers raised?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Honourable Somi, for the comments. We tried to find out exactly what was happening in this financial year, because there seemed to have been a serious volatility in the exchange rate, because when you look at the figures, they are quite significantly outside of what was budgeted for. So we did not find exactly what was happening there, because it's the only year where what we budgeted was, if you look at the records, what we budgeted was way less than what we paid for. Not way less, but significantly less than what we paid for. So maybe we can go back and check, be much more meticulous so that we can provide a reason, but we came to a conclusion that there was no one to be held accountable or to be held responsible because it was outside of but I do take a point that when we make budgetary allocation, we must be able to have the ability to predict what could happen in the international exchange rates. The point is taken, Chair, and I think our plea is that there isn't really much that you can do except to ask that we condone this. I'm not sure if the team has got something to say, but yeah, that will be my response.
Acting CFO.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, I couldn't agree more. I think CFOs play, a very important role when it comes to budgeting. But I think we must also remember, Chair, that when we look at MTF, we plan 3 years ahead. So we are already indicating, the budget for the LTA, and that is how the allocation happens. So if there are changes happening, in 3 years' time, it's very hard to predict. As a CFO or as any other body. And I think when you do the budgeting, I think Treasury will issue guidelines with regard to how the percentage that will be allowed in terms of annual escalation of budget or budget amounts. So in this particular, or in this case, the escalation was taken into consideration over the next 3 years. But what couldn't have been predicted was the exchange rate, in 3 years ahead, when the budget was submitted to National Treasury. But what I agree with is that maybe the payment shouldn't have been made in the first place, unless money was found to cover for a possible over expenditure. And I think that is where the sin happened. But in our department, we have a budget advisory committee that meets and is very functional at the moment. So I don't think these things will happen going forward, because on a monthly basis and quarterly basis we do meet as a budget advisory committee to look at budget versus expenditure, as an early warning system. Reports are also going to EXCO on a monthly basis on exactly where we are in terms of budget versus expenditure. So I think controls are in place currently to prevent something like this from happening again. And I'm going to pause there. Thank you, Chair.
Out of interest, how
Okay,
long
Chair-
have you been
Chair,
acting?
Before Chair, you speak when you're on last person.
No, I'm just on.
Another method that you could employ, is that if you are told this year that affiliation is R2, why don't you pay for a stretched period, as you would appreciate that indeed the volatility of a dollar rand relationship creates problems for the country. You can have a payment for the entire period of MTF, then you solve the problem. So you advance to reasoning, to treasury, on your own behavioral, you see patterns in as far as financial prudence is concerned. So those are the angles that you must as well look into going forward, because you don't have to create a dogma on these matters. When you know that today the rent to a dollar is 19 rand, and there's expectation that it might go to 25 come some period. So deal with things as you speak now to offset that kind of unexpected relationship in as far as the markets behave. So to say no one responsible is really not acceptable. People must learn to live within and adjust themselves within this kind of a thing. So please, DM, don't be comfortable with that kind of a language. You see, your officers must live within that kind of flexibility going forward.
How long have you been acting?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the comments. It's really noted. Chair, I've been appointed as acting from the 1st of October 2022. So I've been
you are
11
11
months.
months.
Yes. Thank you.
Can I imagine the acting DG is acting because the DG is abroad? Right? There's someone else acting. It was yourself and the acting DG. Acting DDG. Oh, that acting. How long have you been acting, sir? Just your mic?
From July. This month, this year.
This year.
Yes.
What position did you occupy prior?
CIO, head of IT.
So now someone's acting in that position.
Yes.
DM, you know how if you acting, but an acting CFO for almost a year now.
Yes, Chair, that is the only position that is vacant. The position of the DG has been filled permanently. The position of DDG administration, we received a request from small business to second the DDG for a period of about 6 months, which we have acceded to. DDG Manzino should be coming back soon. So essentially the only position that is vacant is the CFO. We are in the process now of filling in that position. It did take a
At
while.
what point is the process, DG? At DM? Because process is very... Yeah.
Yes, it is a year that it has been vacant. As I say, we are in the process of filling in that position. The delay really was initially, I'm sure I don't want to be seen to be justifying, but I'm sure that you are aware that the departmental structure is not yet finalized. So the idea was to begin to finalize that. Unfortunately, it proven that the process is taking quite long. So we ended up deciding to advertise all the vacant position. The selection panel has been put in place. I've seen a memo last week which we have approved with recommendation to the minister for other positions which have been already processed. I think there are about 3 chief director positions which have been processed. This one is still outstanding. The selection panel is busy with that. So I guess as soon as they are done, they will send us the recommendation, and that will be the last position that will be vacant in the senior management.
CFO, one final thing. You said that in your view the payment should not have been done. Did I hear you correctly when you were making a comment earlier?
Yeah, Chair, no, you heard me correctly. I said maybe the payment was not supposed to be done before. You know, they have checked the amount on the budget and where the budget is available. Because I could see that the request to Treasury was only sent after the payment was already made, or the payments were already made.
See, now that puts a spanner in the works. That puts a spanner in the works. Okay, we've heard you. Colleagues, are you fine, DM? I see you wanting to...
Yeah, well, I don't understand the latest comment by the acting CFO. I don't know what is implying that we should not comply with our international obligations. I think that is the effect of what the suggestion is, because if we affiliate, we have to pay the affiliation fee. That's straight as that, and we have to find money to pay and attend to it. I can imagine if all the affiliates of ITU were to say, no, we're paying less because of this other reason internally, I don't think that will be in line with our obligations of our membership of the international. So I do not subscribe to that view, but of course I think the call will be for you, Chairperson, to make. Thank you.
It needs a level of clarity. I know we had closed it, but yeah, it's fine. We have heard you. Colleagues, anything else? It's just that this, yeah, but this is real. All right, DM, let me take this opportunity to thank you and your team of actors. Acting DG, DDG, acting CFO. Thank you very much. Let us excuse you. We will communicate our decision in due course. Thank you very much. Now, all right, we're going to take DCOG because Water and Sanitation is awaiting a representative of the executive. The DM had indicated that they are on the way. Hamba baba. Niyofika ni flight in. DCOG, over to you. Yeah? See, us as the unauthorized expenditure team, we're being overworked here. Whoever's presenting is to sit here. I don't bite. All right, let's take Minister, good morning and welcome to you and your team. You'll introduce them, you'll make your initial opening remarks as you have observed, and then you'll hand over to your team. They had opportunity to set up. IT. Oh, there we go. All right, let's go.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Honorable members, let me appreciate the opportunity given to COCTA to come and make a presentation on our unauthorized expenditure for financial year 2006-2007. So just for process flow, we have also attached quite a list of correspondence between ourselves, and Treasury obviously wouldn't go through it, but you will see as the CFO is presenting, will then be indicating how we try to deal with it. Just of interest, when I was going through and finalizing, I was explaining to my daughter, she's 23 years. And when this unauthorized occurred, she was 6 years old. And I was asking the CFO some few questions, and she says, Ma, you can actually think what I was doing when I was 6 years old, and I can't recall very well. But Chair, that was on a lighter note. This occurred, Chair, as a result of costs which were related to a process which we all can relate to, the Commission of Traditional Leadership Disputes and Claims, commonly known as the Nhlapo Commission, which was tasked, amongst other things, with the main task of dealing with legal and disputes with traditional leaders and council, and ultimately assisting the country in the acknowledgements of traditional leaders, kings and queenships. Well, so they did the research, and in some instances would have to obviously utilize legal services and get legal opinion on the standing thereof of traditional leadership. At the time, the department was DPLG and was not necessarily divided according to cooperative governance and traditional affairs that we have today. And that is why today, Chair brought 2 DGs in the current form of today. On my left is DG Depofa, the previous of DPSA. He's our current DG for traditional affairs. On my right, it's DG extreme right, Changan, who's DG for DCOC, and CFO Funani Mutlatsi, DG DCOC. So we've brought the entire team because we've jointly worked on the DPLG of the time in the current form. And with you, and that is why we explain, I think in the second last bullet there, that the department and under DCOC, historically all the unauthorized and irregular and whatever were then kept into that department. So we're looking at the unauthorized expenditure, Chair, of 1.1, to be exact is 1,123,000, divided in A and B as 693,000, which was mainly for subsistence and research for the rankings, and 430,000, which was on legal fees. Chair, before I hand over to the DG, I could just indicate that on the 2 are related, A and B, in that when the commission was doing its work, it will then discover an additional traditional leadership, which they will have to look into, visit, interview people, do the research, and then in some instances refer that to legal services. Now, it's difficult to estimate what state law advisor will charge you, so you're dependent on the legal advice and the cost that you may have to incur. to pay that or to settle the legal opinion on either the litigation or the dispute itself in the traditional sitting of that traditional council. And that's how we arrived at this 1.1, Chair, with regard to subsistence for research and legal services for verification of the disputes and claims for the kingship program. DG Changane, I will hand over to you and the CFO, of course, with the permission of the Chair, to just take us through on the presentation. Chair, I will touch at the end on a difficult question of consequence management. But I can state up front that there was no forensic that was undertaken by the department at the time, but we verified the processes in how was the booking done, for example, for travel, what was the procedure, what was the cost, and what was the reasoning. The report is there. So there was not necessarily, in our view, a spending which there was no value for it. Thank you.
Okay, Minister, you will delegate as you deem fit with the DG. DG, we are confused. Many lama departments so lugwana usul usuga cocktail uga decog manch. Okay, I'll go uhlale laga decog. But if I'm not mistaken, we were dealing with water and the Lesotho Highlands water project. But over to
Thank you.
yeah, maybe DG Phillips will say there's something that you must answer for, so you see. Hey. All right. DG, over to you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Minister has covered what one would call an executive summary of what the project is all about. But I guess it's important to remind the committee that the DG at the time was DG Lindi Msanganandlela. That was 2006, 2007. DG Vusi Matonsela also presided over this matter in 2014. I think DG Matonsela wrote to Treasury for this matter to be condoned, and also in 2018 DG Matsidiso presided on the matter and wrote to Treasury for this matter to be condoned. I think it's important upfront, I'm sure Minister is going to come back to this question, to state that when any misconduct is committed, an investigation has to be done. That's the starting point. You investigate so that you get a sense of whether there should be consequence management or not. It's more than likely that the previous DGs applied their mind, but we try to get that information as to what is it exactly that the previous DGs have done on the matter so that we can address the question of condonation. As you know, the rule is clear. There's no condonation without consequence management. So consequence management will happen if an investigation is done. But in this case, there was no investigation. And I guess it's in the nature of the misconduct itself, because this relates to legal services fee. You always get them late because you have to work with the Department of Justice to deal with those services. And also the S&T, because the S&T was incurred by the service provider. You could argue that maybe there were cost overruns linked to the project itself, but it is the nature of the project. If it was a built environment project, you know that you have to go after the contract managers and the project managers, but in this case it's a little bit tricky. Chairperson, without wasting much of your time, because Minister has given an overall summary of what the project is all about, I'm going to ask the CFO to to take us through the presentation. Then myself and DG DPSA will come back as requested. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DG. Thank you, Minister. Honorable Chair, honorable members, thank you for this opportunity. Minister and DG have covered largely the background that everyone sees on the slide there, but I think the emphasis, Chairperson, is more on the fact that the underestimation of the budget at that time and the costs led to this unauthorized expenditure to be incurred by the department. And I would not run much on it just for the sake of time, but I do want to indicate further that the steps that have been undertaken and is largely covered by the DG in terms of the number of DGs that oversaw the program from 2014 on the matter of 2000 and 2006 and 2007 unauthorized expenditure on this matter. And those steps that were undertaken led to the final recommendation to National Treasury to utilize Section 34(2) of the PFMA, which suggests to us that we could use any other future allocated fundings, or rather as savings in the next outer years, just to cap this unauthorized expenditure. We are not charging it against any revenue, however, we're charging it from the costs that the department has. And I think the emphasis, Chairperson, here is that while the budget was 25.4 billion then, we did not overspend on the vote. We only overspent on the main division, and I think it's Program 7 and Program 1 in this instance, whereby we categorize the legal fees under Program 1 and we categorize the S&T under Program 7 that was for the traditional, and as indicated, it was more of the independent research that was covered by the Ndlapo Commission then. So the recommendation is very clear here, but we do accept the Chair's point earlier to say it's not binding, but our emphasis here is that the committee should note that the department then never had any other overspending over the outer years, if not post 2006, 2007. So that overspending that was incurred, as unfortunate as it was, it could have been avoided, Chairperson, because one could have actually requested for the virement between the two programs or the shifting of funds within the line items within that program. But as we were looking at the budget itself for 2006 and 2007, the only amount that could have been used was only 2 million, because 817 of the unspent amount was related to the MIC. And we know that one could not use the conditional grant for any other purpose. So the operational cost then was only 2 million that was underspent then. But that not being done, unfortunately, it led to this UA being incurred for that particular purpose. I must emphasize that those steps that have been taken to resolve this led to National Treasury even this year requesting more information from the department, which we provided, and subsequently it led to the committee calling the department to SCOPA. And the emphasis here, Chairperson, is that the department never appeared on SCOPA before, and it's the first time that the department is appearing on SCOPA on the particular matter, Chairperson. Chair, I think it's very important for us to can indicate what the department had done to curb the future reoccurrences of that. As I indicated, that we have not had any overspending during that period. We saw it fit then that we put into place controls for us to be able to avoid the future reoccurrence of such nature, as DG has indicated that this could be of a different intent. But I do want to indicate that we ensure that all the projects that we are funding in the department should be properly budgeted for and approved before they occur, and it would mean that everything that has to be has a financial implication has to via the Office of the CFO Chair. And I think if that happens, the Office of the CFO is better placed to indicate that there's money, there's no money in item, program, and could advise further to say money could be taken from one item or the program or another. And if it exceeds the 8%, obviously, Chair, we cannot do that because we're limited to the 8%, and it still stands today. So we've established a number of policies and procedures in managing the costs that are in the department. We also have our fora and structures that we look at the budget generally as a department, just so that we don't overspend or underspend where it's not supposed to be. So we take this as a standard operating procedure, and because it's a continuous exercise, but we do revisit this just for us to address some weaknesses in the system as well. So we look at all these other controls in place, and since we had put these controls in place, we've never had any over expenditure post 2006 and 2007. This amount, Chair, is also appearing in our financial statements and our annual report as a position in the statement of the account, which is our balance sheet, and it's also in an annual report. But our plea today, Chairperson, is also to work on the recommendation that the National Treasury has addressed, such that we ask Parliament to charge this against the funds allocated for future years' allocation under the department vote, and we recommend that this being, because we're not able to recover them, to any official responsible, Chair, and the fact that there was no overall spending on the vote for 2006-2007. We also plead that, considering those controls that we have put in place, that this can be addressed in an amicable manner, and we do indicate that our reports post 2006 and 2007, they bear testimony to this. But again, the emphasis on the fact that we did not have any consequence management, there was no malicious intent. The services that were rendered were solely for the purpose of the research and the authorization by Minister then for Nhlapo Commission. So there is a report. So as Minister has indicated, this was not in vain. It was not a fruitless and wasteful expenditure. However, it has been declared as unauthorized. Hence, we're bringing it to the House for amnesty, for us to be able to remove it from our books, and that it be cleared against all the annual report as well. But I also want to indicate, Chairperson, that while we're looking at this whole matter, and again emphasize the fact that the service was rendered, the underspending then was also not because there was no service then. It was a matter of that the budget was spent solely for the intent that was there. And any other overspending that may have occurred has been taken care of between the main division and between the items within the department. So we are again indicating that there was no service delivery that was unaffected, and even in future, Chair, even if we can take this money out of the savings of the department as we shall plan for it, pending today's decision, there will not be any service delivery that will be affected through the process as it shall be undertaken. And Chair, I think as we request the amnesty from the department, from the committee, we are pleading to indicate that the SCOPA considers our application for the removal of the unauthorized expenditure and charge it against the department future savings. And as Minister had indicated, we have a number of annexures that we have also given in terms of unauthorized expenditure, and they are available for the committee's consumption. Thank you so much, DG. Thank you, Chairperson.
Minister?
Thank you, Chair. I think we'll stop here. As I'd indicated, the slides that are showing and coming after this will just be the annexures, which indicates the process that has been taken since 2014 to date. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments, questions, colleagues? Samuel?
No comment. I'm a beneficiary of that process.
Then you should have declared a conflict of interest at the outset.
I'm a beneficiary of that process. Not directly, Chair.
For sure, fair enough.
Indirectly, on the legal fees. There's still a number of those challenges which had to face the Commission, even overall beyond its own life. That's why I make that kind of reference. Amahahabe successfully had a good challenge there. So I'm saying I'm at least a beneficiary of that process. I could easily say so. No comment. Thank you.
I think, Honorable Hadebe.
Thanks, Chair. Let's just welcome the report, the presentation, detailed, relevant information. I must also state it up front, Chair, that this is my committee, So, just in case there are perceived conflict, at least I've declared. No, the one issue that I would like to highlight, DG Uchangane said there was no investigation into the matter. Sometimes investigation does not necessarily mean you must find someone guilty. It's just to understand what happened and what could have been done better. And even though you know that there was value for money, but in retrospect, it helps to say we could have managed the situation differently. So I would advise and encourage that even though there was value for money, but it always augurs well when you've done all the checks and balances in a form of an investigation. It's not necessarily trying to find fault or someone guilty. Thank you, Chair.
All right, so there was an indication that the transactions were gone through, a process of verification was done. I think that's what the Minister indicated, that on each of these travel and subsistence there was that. So I think that provides the basis of a portfolio of evidence which we can actually look at. And I think there's a keen regard for the fact that this process was a moving target, to the extent to which up to now some of the matters are not concluded. All right. So, you're right? All right. Okay. Minister, thank you very much. You will hear our decision in due course. You will be finalizing our report. It will go to the Standing Committee on Finance. It will go to the House, and you will know what happens. But as I said, the recommendations of National Treasury are not binding, so we may be.
So shouldn't ngacela ushwele nami. Njengabanye ama-ministers, I can really request.
Well, you know,
But thank you very much,
Ushwele is
Chair.
relative.
Thank you very much, Chair, and to the committee.
No, thank you very much, Minister. And
Time
thank you very much
appreciated.
for
Thank you
being
very
here
much.
and for bringing your twins, the two teachers. But I think one must conclude by saying, DG, we will request your cooperation with the Public Service and Administration matter in order for them to bring it to a logical parliamentary conclusion. Because in the absence of information, I want to be very categorical. We will not proceed with matters. We are laboring on an outlook of transparency and a full-scale presentation of information. So your cooperation in that regard is requested, and I'm quite certain that you will afford them the benefit of information at your disposal. All right, on that note, thank you very much. Right, now we've got water. Minister tells of Young, we'll have past 10 with DM. Do you know how far it is? Maybe DG Phillips, do you require Abab Shangane before he goes? You've already apologized. Well, similarly, he will cooperate with you on any matter that's required. All right. UDM is how far out? Let's take a 5-minute comfort break, colleagues, and then we'll take water. They will set up so long the DM has arrived. 5-minute comfort break. Right, colleagues, let's resume. Let's start. Let's start. All right, colleagues, let us proceed. We are going to take the Department of Water, Sanitation. DM, welcome. You had indicated that you'd be here at 10:30, which you were. Thank you very much. And to say your DG was the first one here, very timeless. So was barely out. All right, so he's quite familiar with our process now is observed. We'll hand over to you, Tim, if there's any opening remarks, and then the DG and his team will take us through the presentation. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and to all the members of the Select Committee, and our condolences again. I can see I'm being pushed to sit on your table here. I was doing a disclaimer to my leadership on the other side. I've not done the floor crossing. And Chair, we are very pleased that we come to you to give a public account on the matter that is on the table. The question of the unauthorized expenditure for the two financial years, 16-17 and 17-18. And just to indicate that significant progress has been made, the Director General that is here, Dr. Sean Phillips, and the CFO, Franz Moatse, they will make the presentation. Safe to say that after that period, the department has worked very hard to eliminate unauthorized. And secondly, to indicate to Chairperson that where possible, and employees that are still in the employ of the state, consequence management has followed, and there will be a demonstration of that. But there are instances when people leave the system, and it has not been easy to be able to follow through to do those because in terms of jurisdiction. But at this point, with your permission, Chair, I'll hand over to the Director General to briefly make the presentation, as we have said, under your guidance, supported by the CFO. Thank you very much, Slal.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairperson, honourable members. I will present parts A, B, and C of the presentation, and then I'll ask the CFO to provide more detail on our financial recovery plans. In introduction, the department was in a financially poor condition, but we've been implementing a turnaround and financial recovery plan for several years now, which has included a focus on service delivery improvement, improving our performance and discipline and consequence management systems, stabilizing the institution, organizational restructuring, particularly with a view to putting more emphasis or additional emphasis on water services as opposed to just water resources that we did in the past, but also implementing some of the requirements of the National Water Act, such as the creation of catchment management agencies, and some of the requirements of the National Development Plan, such as the creation of the National Water Resource Infrastructure Agency. We've also been focusing on building internal capacity and staff training and development, and putting in place improved processes and standard operating procedures. We currently have a major focus on improving the efficiency of our supply chain management, but also we've introduced much better controls with regard to financial management. We've putting an emphasis on improving our infrastructure maintenance in terms of improved planning,
improved asset management, and improved processes for maintenance. And we've also been working on the ethics and organizational culture. So as I indicated, at one point we were considered bankrupt due to bank overdrafts, unfunded accruals and commitments. That is not the case at all anymore. At one time we owed the TCTA service providers and contractors more money than was available, and we operated on bank overdrafts. And that resulted in negative audit outcomes. And also during that period there were a number of cases of corruption, unauthorized, irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure. But implementation of our financial recovery and turnaround plan has resulted in the situation where the department is again in a healthy financial position, and incidents of both irregular and unauthorized expenditure have been greatly reduced. Irregular expenditure has been greatly introduced. Unauthorized expenditure has been eliminated since 1718. We haven't had any further unauthorized expenditure. So as I indicated, we've been strengthening our internal controls to reduce the risk of future unauthorized, irregular and fruitless expenditure. We've been carrying out investigations through our internal audit unit into all the historic unauthorized and irregular fruitless expenditure. As I indicated the last time we were here in Scopa, we had a backlog of these investigations, and we took measures to temporarily increase the capacity of our internal audit unit, including appointing people on contract, but also creating a panel of service providers to assist us to deal with this backlog of investigations and internal audit. And the backlog is in the process of being eliminated now. Most of it has been dealt with in terms of investigations, and we are acting on all the results of the investigations, implementing the recommendations, including where necessary taking disciplinary action or strengthening controls or recovering money in instances of financial loss, and laying criminal charges where the investigations indicate that should be done. Finally, after going through all those processes, the CFO is then engaging with the National Treasury for condonation and to facilitate Parliament approval of the unauthorised expenditure. Turning to the actual unauthorised expenditure, we have unauthorised expenditure on our books from 2 financial years, 16-17 and 17-18. Encompassing both the overspending of a vote and overspending of a main division within a vote. And the root cause on both financial years was non-compliance with Section 391 of the PFMA, which requires the accounting officer to ensure that expenditure is in accordance with the vote and the main divisions with the vote, and effective and appropriate steps are taken to prevent unauthorized expenditure. And steps are taken to prevent any overspending of the vote of the department or main division with the vote. So what happened during these 2 financial years is that there were 2 programs on which unauthorized expenditure was incurred. The first being the bucket eradication program, which was started without being funded, and secondly the war on leaks program, for which the former minister issued a directive for implementation when the program was unfunded. So firstly, sorry, I've gone, yes, okay. So with regard to the war on leaks program, it was initially funded from the water trading entity, and the water trading entity is, as honourable members will know, collects revenue from the sale of raw water, and is supposed to use that money to reinvest in raw water infrastructure such as dams and their maintenance. But the War on Leaks program was focused on water services, not on water resources, and therefore the funding of that program from the water trading entity was deemed to be irregular, and it also contributed to the bank overdraft of the water trading entity. So once it had been found that that expenditure was irregular,
the water trading entity had to refrain from spending on unfunded mandates, such as municipal water services projects and the War and Leaks program. And the War and Leaks program was then transferred to the main account of the department, but of course the department hadn't been allocated a budget in this regard, which resulted in it becoming unauthorized expenditure. And in those years, the audit reports were qualified with regard to this unauthorized expenditure, and there were also findings of irregular expenditure in this regard. So turning in detail to the 2016-2017 financial year unauthorized expenditure, the unauthorized expenditure in that year totaled 292 million. What happened, the sanitation function has been moving around between different departments within the national government. At one time it was in the Department of Human Settlements, which in 2012 commissioned an audit on the state of sanitation and found that some provinces and communities were still using bucket toilets, particularly in 4 provinces. And then the bucket eradication program was initiated then, but then in 2014 the function was transferred from DHS to DWS. This program wasn't well planned. The scope included installing waterborne sanitation toilets in communities and connecting them to the wastewater treatment or to the sewage networks, to the waterborne sewage systems, but there wasn't provision in the planning to upgrade the pumping stations and to upgrade the wastewater treatment works. So in many instances, the program has resulted in problems, exacerbation of problems of the wastewater treatment works not having sufficient capacity to deal with the increased sewage being channeled to them. So the scope of the works didn't include the construction of outfall sewer lines, refurbishment of existing pump stations and new pump stations, as well as upgrading of wastewater treatment works. Because this was found to be unauthorized expenditure, the department did undertake an investigation into this unauthorized expenditure. The investigation was undertaken by our internal audit unit, and the conclusion was that the Chief Director for National Sanitation Services mismanaged the budget that was allocated to the bucket eradication program, resulting in material overspending and unauthorized expenditure. And it recommended that disciplinary action should be taken against that Chief Director. So disciplinary action was taken. The Chief Director was charged with misconduct and the disciplinary hearing was held. The presiding officer found the employee not guilty. And the presiding officer found that there was insufficient proof that the employee acted deliberately negligently, causing the department to incur this unauthorized expenditure. I've been told, Chairperson, that some of the former DGs and Chief Financial Officers of the department were requested to appear before this disciplinary hearing and to provide evidence, but they declined to do so. So, in my view, we could have managed, the department could have managed the disciplinary process better, and the senior officials of the department should have gone and provided evidence in the disciplinary case. So some contributing factors to this unauthorized expenditure in 2016-17 included that the bucket eradication program was not sufficiently well planned when it was initiated. There wasn't a proper feasibility study for the program. In some cases, contractors were appointed without engineering designs being done. The estimated costs for the whole program were not properly calculated, and hence the budget for the program was insufficient. And as I indicated, there was no planning for upgrading of the wastewater treatment works to deal with the additional sewage load resulting from increased numbers of connections to the waterborne sanitation systems. We also did not properly manage the program when we took it over from the Department of Human Settlements. We entered into contractual commitments which exceeded the available budget. But, Chairperson, the Department has since put in place improved controls to prevent overcommitments against available budgets. Those controls are both within our SCM unit and our legal services unit before contracts are approved for signing. So we have multiple steps. The supply chain unit checks that budgets are available to ensure that we don't repeat statements against available budgets. Turning to the 2017-2018 unauthorized expenditure, which totaled 349 million. This was related to the War on Leaks program, which was implemented without a budget allocation. The objective was to reduce water losses, and in that regard the intention was to train 15,000 youth to be able to do basic plumbing skills, and the main intention was for these youth, after they've been trained, to be employed by municipalities. However, no commitment was obtained, firm commitment was obtained from municipalities that they would employ these youth after they'd been trained. The former executive authority issued a directive to Rand Water to manage the program, and EWCETA was requested to do the training, but that was done without a budget having been available. So the project was divided into 3 phases with different targets for training learners in the different phases. We've since stopped this program. We're awaiting a closeout report from EWCETA. The directive to Rand Water was withdrawn some time ago. The complete closure of the program is awaiting the results of an ongoing mediation process between the EWCETA and the appointed training service provider with regard to some disputes with regard to some of the claims. This unauthorized expenditure was also investigated. This time it was investigated by our risk unit. Chairperson and honourable members, you'll recall the last time we came to Scopa, we explained that in the past some of our investigations were done by our risk unit and some by our internal audit unit, but we've since changed that and centralized, and all of our investigations are now managed by our internal audit unit. But at the time, this investigation was carried out by our risk unit, and it concluded that when the directive to Rand Water to implement the program was signed by the executive authority, the program was not in the approved business plan for the financial year and had not been budgeted for. But the former Director General approved a request from the former Chief Financial Officer requesting money from the account of the water trading entity to be used for the program, which was in contravention of Treasury regulations and led to irregular expenditure for the water trading entity, contributed to its bank overdraft. And as I indicated, as a result, the program had to be moved from the water trading entity to the department's budget, but the department hadn't budgeted for it, and that resulted in unauthorized expenditure. The recommendations from this risk report was that the former Director Generals and former Acting Director Generals should be held accountable and responsible for the unauthorized expenditure. They're referring to the former Director Generals and Acting Director Generals who were in office at the time when this program was initiated and implemented. Chairperson, honourable members, at this time as well, there was quite a high turnover of Director Generals and Acting Director Generals in the department. In terms of implementation of the recommendations, I'd like to we also submitted with this presentation a payment schedule for the unauthorized expenditure, and I'm just going to go to that payment schedule to show who the payments were authorized by. But of those Director Generals and forming acting Director Generals, only one is still working for the department. The others have resigned or on retirement, and none of them are currently working elsewhere in the public service. As a preliminary step for the officials still working in the department, it's a preliminary step towards taking disciplinary action as recommended by the risk report. That official was asked to make representations as to why she should not be charged, and the official made representations, and as I indicated in the last time when I came to Scopa, I, as the DG in October last year, decided not to pursue disciplinary action because there wasn't sufficient evidence that to lay charges against her, also considering her representations, and also because, as indicated in the risk report, the SIU were undertaking a preliminary investigation, which we were told would lead to a recommendation to the President for a full SIU investigation into this war on leaks program. That request for proclamation for full investigation into the war on leaks program has now been made and is on the President's desk. So before, I would just like to bring up the spreadsheet showing that we submitted, showing the officials who authorized the expenditure. Sorry, my computer's now stuck. Honourable members, you have the spreadsheet, but there are a number of former DGs and CFOs who authorized the expenditures, including former DG Mashitisho, DDG for Infrastructure Zandile Mate, I think it's former CFO Manukuza, and former CFO Mkhizi, and the former acting DG Mochotli, who is the one who I was mentioning just now, who made representations, did not authorize any of these expenditures, as you'll see in the spreadsheet. As I indicated, all of these officials, apart from former acting DG Mochotli, have since left the department and are not working in the public service. Apart from the former DDG for Infrastructure, DDG Mate, and as you're aware, Chairperson, honourable members, former DDG Mate was charged with regard to other irregular expenditure related to the SAP contracts that procured by the department, and a disciplinary hearing was held for her and she was dismissed. So she's been dismissed on other charges. She's one of the people who authorized some of these payments, which were later deemed to be unauthorized. Let me just
Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt. Is this the spreadsheet? Because it has no names on it.
No, that's not the spreadsheet.
It's not. Yeah, but was it not sent to us, Mr. Chairman?
Was it submitted? It was submitted. Sorry, my computer's just decided to crash here.
You can send it. It's fine. Let's proceed.
Yes, I need a teenager. Can you help?
Okay, maybe unplug it and do all you need to do whilst it's unplugged.
It didn't like switching from the PowerPoint to the spreadsheet. Take mine. Take mine. There we go. Okay, this is the spreadsheet that we submitted, and it's got all the payments which we made, and it shows the amounts of the unauthorized expenditure and who authorized the payment. So it shows the rank of the previous people who did it. So you can see Mashitisho, the former DG, the Chief Director Sanitation Services, who is the one who was charged, but the presiding officer found them not guilty. There's former DDG Marty, who was charged on other matters and was found guilty and dismissed. Former acting CFO, she's since left the department and is not working for the public service. Marty again, who was dismissed. Mashitisho, who's left the department and is not working in the public service. And then those are all the ones related to the unauthorized expenditure related to the bucket eradication program. And then for the War on Leaks program, the payments were authorized by Mashitisho and the former Chief Financial Officer Mkhize, both who left the department and are not working in the public service. Have you got the presentation on here as well, Michael?
For instance, they do that CFO acted as DG at some point, the Mkhize that's been cited there. So just for ease of reference for colleagues.
So some of the contribution factors which led to the 2017-2018 financial year is that I've explained how it was initially funded from the water trading entity, which was irregular because that's not what the water trading entity is for. And then it had to be transferred to the main account of the department, for which a budget had not been allocated for this program. But there's some similarities between this War on Leaks program and the bucket eradication. There was also no proper feasibility study for this War on Leaks program. And as I indicated, although it appears to have been well-intentioned, it wasn't sufficiently thoroughly planned. For example, that there was no formal commitments from the municipalities to hire the learners after they'd been trained. The former accounting officers and chief financial officers of the department should not have allowed the program to be funded from the water trading entity. But we've since put in place control measures to ensure that the revenues received in the water trading entity are only used for authorized purposes of the water trading entity, which relate to the National Water Resource Function and not to water services functions. I'd now like to hand over to the CFO to take us through the financial recovery plan.
Thank you very much, and greetings to the Chair and the members of SCOPA. Chairperson, I'll be taking the SCOPA through the financial recovery plan, just an overview. I'm now on slide number 19. The financial recovery plan, Chairperson, covers a number of broad strategies that we are implementing as a department. Can I proceed, West?
Yes.
Yes. A number of broad strategies, including Chairperson, the funding and budget management, expenditure control, as well as financial governance and accountability. I think in relation to the matter we're discussing today around unauthorized expenditure, it focuses more on the need to confirm your funding, your budgets, before you issue out, for example, the directives. Discipline as well as you implement the projects, that before you make any of the payments that you make sure that there's a budget available for those. Other areas that we are covering on the financial recovery plan had to do with the turnaround of the audit outcomes, which has improved significantly since the years in which we have incurred this unauthorized expenditure. There were issues of bank overdraft. We know that we were not allowed as a department to incur bank overdraft. Those happened as per the reasons that the Director General alluded to earlier on. But those, Chairperson, we have dealt with and we have made a significant improvement. Other interventions that we are working on as the department to strengthen our financial controls were covered during the presentation, but it also has to do with the disciplinary proceedings that we have been putting in place, the control environment where officials are able to indicate also to the leadership that some of these undertakings that we are making are not funded or are not compliant, to ensure that we do not sit with the challenges that has been explained earlier on by the DG, especially on the oil leaks, as well as the bucket eradication programs, which led to the overspending of the vote in 1 year, and then this other year, the main division of a vote. We have dealt with issues around policies, standard operating procedures within the organization. Those have been strengthened, that we cannot commit the department in any way, whether through a ministerial directive or any other tender, without confirming a fund. All those, Chairperson, includes also that we may not incur any improper expenditure, be it unauthorized, irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure, without proper assessment and investigations being undertaken. Over and above those, there is a concerted effort for training within the organization, also for our officials, that they are able to guide. For example, you'll have a junior person who must process a payment. Those officials are in the position to stand up and indicate that in terms of my standard operating procedures, I cannot process this payment without a budget, and therefore I'm unable to capture those. So those are some of the interventions that we have made available within the organization. Our internal audit as well has been assisting with awareness campaigns overall within the organization. As indicated there, that over a number of years we've managed to conduct 98 sessions, where a number of officials who were reached amounting to 2,585. We are also, Chairperson, working closely with our implementing agents. Some of these improper expenditures occurred because of lack of oversight over our implementing agents. So those are some of the interventions. And on slide number 21, it's just a summary of the same information that the Director General spoke to earlier on. The 2 years of overspending. 1 year it was overspending of a vote, but the main division was overspent more than the spending of the vote. So that is the one that has been recorded as unauthorized expenditure. And in 17-18, the 348 was recorded. On slide number 22, in concluding the presentation, Chairperson, we are confirming that the trend around improper expenditure is reflecting a decline of those incidents. Unauthorized expenditure never occurred since those 2 years. In the case of irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure, although they're not part of this discussion today, we can also confirm that those are actually going down as well. We have put in various measures to ensure that we are able to obtain condonations for those incidents of improper expenditure. There's also a strategy where we are exceeding from all those contracts, as indicated earlier on oil leaks. Phase 3, for example, the contract that our implementing agent had was over 800 million. through the retracting of that directive, the department managed to avoid incurring those costs. And stringent cash management and banking controls are also being implemented. We don't have any incidents of bank overdraft, and there is also discipline within the organization to ensure that we comply with the PFMA. There are disciplinary proceedings that are ongoing, as indicated in the presentation. Those goes beyond the unauthorized expenditure, and we are continuing to work closely with the SIU and other law enforcement agencies to pursue some of the cases, and this has resulted, amongst others, with recoveries. For example, on the matter of SEP, we managed to recoup 413, and also we have engaged EOH, where they have agreed to repay the remainder of the amount with interest. That concludes, Chairperson, some of the interventions that we are making to ensure that the department sustains this financial recovery plan going forward. Thank you.
DM?
No, thanks, Chairperson. I think we've come to the conclusion of our presentation, because at a particular point in the beginning of this sixth parliamentary term, you remember the situation was very bad, very, very bad. There's been improvement, and with the stabilization led by the DG, as the executive were very content. Safe to say, Chair, that the program on own leaks, a very good idea, but implemented incorrectly, and we took a decision because we're not going to proceed with that program in that form. When Macingwane came in, we stopped it, because it's a responsibility of the municipality to manage their assets. We can support them. And many initiatives were taken to absorb those young people, but we're not going to continue with something that was unlawful, because it gave us a very, very dim view of the department. And then lastly, on the bucket eradication, we proceed because it's a program that you know, but all the systems are in place. We can't allow our people, Chair, to continue to live in inhumane conditions. When you grow up, you know nothing except that sewer must be running there inside your house, flushing it back. And that program is proceeding, but with the proper control systems in place and accountability mechanism. At the level of the ministry, we are very satisfied. But that's the brief account on your expectations, Chair, and we'll hand over back to you.
All right, thank you very much, DM, DG, CFO, and the team. Colleagues, Honorable Liz.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, thank you. It's I just wanted to go a little bit deeper into the previous DGs who refused to give evidence in that one case. And then we've seen a list of DGs or of officials who've since left and been disciplined. Is there an overlap there between those who refused and those who've been dealt with on other matters?
Chair. Conrad?
Chair and members, thank you very much. Yes, there is an overlap.
Let's get an introduction.
Sorry, Chair. My name is Conrad Griefer. I'm the Chief Director for Human Resource Management in the department. There is actually, we were about to take disciplinary action against the previous acting DG, Mkhize, who then resigned from the department, and he was the one that refused to testify at the disciplinary hearing.
Basamia?
Yeah, the report is too detailed, and it has to, because it has gone into a realizable irregular expenditure, though there's a recognition, even in my part, through Chair to the Deputy Minister, that indeed the war on leaks had a very good intention, and that intention goes deeper into what we experience currently in terms of the wreckage of infrastructure, the aged pipelines, the lack of maintenance of such infrastructure, and it is very clear that if it were somewhat implemented correctly, you would have realized some very positive results out of it. We are currently experiencing the same situation where water losses are so immense, and even if you throw it at a municipal level, we cry on the daily basis. You yourselves, you get into the involvement on areas which you're not supposed to be involved in. So it might have been probably at the executive functionary decision-making processes that at some stage a better way going around such kind of programs need to have some form of rethink. I think in your slide, one of your earlier slides, you indicated that there was no sort of assessment in terms of the study permeating into the actual success of such. So it might have been better in a way. So it looks like even though you have realized those kinds of weaknesses, you haven't bothered to get into some corrective measure. You've just said, okay, fine. Nevertheless, municipalities must take charge of their own responsibility. But it as well stops with yourselves as both on the regulatory function as an authority in a sense, because if there's a heavy failure there, it gets back to you, you know. So there's no way to escape. You know, it might be that in this situation, it has resulted into irregularities. So you might want to look into the better ways of getting there. You see, coupled with climate change, you have the breakage of infrastructure, these kinds of weaknesses, they don't need to be somewhat suspended for later indulgence. Because when you get there later, damage would be immense. It might be, just I'm thinking aloud, it might be that in your wisdom, you'd have to charge responsible individuals with a responsibility to get into a way of straightening the operations on the same situation, because it really was a good program. You see, if it was within your ambits in as far as regulations are concerned, it would have been done quite fairly. I'm advancing just that kind of a thought that the insistence of wrongness should not be an insistence of correctiveness, of wanting to act appropriately within such. And lastly, that when I listen to that story which you are throwing on us, is that in terms of consequence management, the department has begun to tread into a line which is acceptable, that whoever is liable for such occurrences, there must be some consequences on it, which is somewhat a good path which we need to applaud. And therefore, my reasoning is that looking into the fact that from 2018, 2017, there's been no recurrence of irregular expenditure and the bound regularity in as far as such actions are concerned. So the guide is there to say we are firmly on the right path, and that firmness justifies the fact that when we look into these areas at our own time, we have to observe as to how best then have to deal with this kind of a scenario. But I think you need to strengthen your way of handling the disciplinary processes, something which you have already seen, that there may be some weaknesses there and so forth. And your investigation by the risk-related unit, it looks like it benefits your ability to knock on these weaknesses from time to time. I don't think there's anything to falter there as per that report. So, colleagues, that's what I can comment on the matters.
Honorable Liz. Oh, okay, one standby. DM.
Maybe on our side, Chair, it's just to Honorable Sommer, just to confirm the culture of impunity is behind us. With this leadership led by Minister Mkhune and ourselves and the DG, there is accountability. And the strengthening, we're very happy that the leadership acknowledges that. That other idea of stopping the program, it does not necessarily mean that we are no longer playing our part. In reality, it was poorly conceptualized, poorly conceptualized, because the issues, if it was conceptualized correctly, that work that was done is one in a small part. With respect to if there's any response by municipality, if there's a service delivery failure. You know, a pipe burst, someone must respond. But on the bigger work of infrastructure failure, of O&M, you know that in terms of access to water, we're about 90%, but in terms of reliability, we've dropped. We're coming closer to around 67% in terms of water being there in the taps all the time, because there's been no investment on O&M over time. And one of the things that the DG has been championing with our support, we are looking at treasurer that there should be a kind of a once-off, where some of these grants, a certain percentage can be used just to deal with the question of replacement. Because other municipalities, their losses are running as high as 65% in metros. And they have no capacity that one day they will be able to replace that infrastructure, unless a certain percentage has to be done. But we could see that from the fiscals, you can't do all these things. That's why we even said the role of the private sector is very important. That's why we have a partnership office that was introduced in the department to throw the capability of the private sector. We'll be going to the leadership now at the executive level. We're even looking at creating conditions where water boards, like if you look at Mfuleni, Rand Water want to come in at their own cost, at risk on their, you know, on the balance sheet, so that they can replace that old infrastructure, but also be able to have a revenue component, because they will never be able to do. You see the problem of Etegwin, the wastewater systems, it's a big thing. But then there's a difficult discussion we're taking internally with the Minister of COCT. You know, municipalities' income in the main is electricity and water. But what they do with the money that is for water, they don't invest it back in water. But everywhere. And in other words, if you don't invest back on the asset, how will you sweat it? We are looking at that. The idea has not died. The issue of non-revenue water, whether is it physical losses, illegal connection and others, is a biggest priority, because it has reversed the gains we had. And many citizens are not happy. But that one, it had a lot of challenges, good intentions, poor conceptualization, and poor implementation. And there was no way we would have proceeded. There was no way. But the other one is cover leadership. abomasipala ngeke sibayekele vele balale phansi.
Honorable Liz. Oh, DG.
Just to add, Chairperson, I think the lesson is that it's the job of the accounting officer to ensure that there is a budget available before a program is proceeded with. Even if there's strong political pressure to proceed because of the urgency of the situation on the ground, the accounting officer must still not make sure that the department doesn't proceed until there's a budget available. And similarly, the accounting officer must ensure that there is proper planning done before things are proceeded with. Again, even if the situation is urgent, which it often is. So, for example, we are giving a lot of support to municipalities now with our Regional Bulk Infrastructure Grant and Water Services Infrastructure Grant, but there's quite stringent, thorough planning processes that are required as part of the processes for both of those grants. And we do meticulously make sure that those processes are followed before the grants are allocated, even if the situation is urgent. Because otherwise, even if there's an urgent situation, but if you don't plan properly, you can end up not having the expenditure achieve what it was intended to achieve. So it's worth taking the additional time to plan properly.
Honourable Liz with the last one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that DG is kind of touching on my question, because there's, in these 2 years of unauthorized expenditure, some 700 million, billion, sorry, or million, thousands, 700 million. Yeah, it's heading towards £1 billion. Assuming, and I think that that's probably the way we may go, that we say take it out of future revenue or budgets. Have you kind of looked at where you could take that 700 million out of future budgets, given the dire circumstances that we've all now been talking about with regard to water infrastructure, wastewater infrastructure? Yeah, so where are you going to cut back in order to meet this unauthorized expenditure?
Wherever we cut back will have dire consequences. There won't be an easy place to cut where there wouldn't be dire consequences. But if that's what we have to do to regularize it, that's what we will have to do.
I mean, is it then not possible to do a special appropriation to compensate? So do the right thing, and then do some sort of special appropriation to get more money out of National Revenue Fund, so that we don't have the consequences that the DG is talking about.
Treasury.
Thank you, Chair. So I suppose there's two ways that Parliament will condone this. One, through either as a charge against the vote or a charge against the revenue fund. So when it is a charge against the revenue fund, then it would mean that the department wouldn't pay for it. Doing a special appropriation would mean anything just above what is currently appropriated, so it would just become part of the normal budget process.
Thank you. I think we can bring that to an end. I do know that because we've brought Treasury, that in June you do a proposal or projection of payment plans of these suggestions or recommendations, so that we could read all of them against the impact and consequence they may have for each department in the event that it's a direct charge against the budget. Because DM, we indicated earlier on when your colleagues of the executive were here that the recommendations of National Treasury are not binding on the committee, but we will consider all the factors when we all the pros and cons. So I think the one thing outstanding from Treasury is where they've made a recommendation for a direct charge to the budget is to present what would be a payment plan over the MTF, and then we would have to look at then the consequences of that. So Treasury, please don't forget that request. DM, thank you very much to you and the team, DG, CFO, Chief Directors. Thank you. You will be hearing from us soon with a decision which we will take to the Standing Committee on Finance and the House. So we try to release you in good time. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Right. Mazamba no kahle.
Teacher ngakuchazela ngeSiswati ne.
Kulolu daba lokusetshenziswa ngemali engagunyaziwe.
Ngikubingelele uma ngifikile.
No, thank you very much, DM. All right, we have the Presidency now, which is the last one. Thank you, TM. The Presidency is here without an executive authority. I'm privy to a letter apologizing for the minister who indicates she's abroad. I did see her on the screens, so I'm not sure how we proceed with such a grave matter of unauthorized expenditure because it's got implications on your budget. So Treasury, please, Presidency, please come to the warm seats here, which water has. All right, so colleagues, the letters that went out went to ministers for the purposes of this exercise, simply because of the nature of. So this morning I was shown a letter from the minister saying she's abroad. And then I jocularly said, if there's one space that has got more deputy ministers than any other, as the president, there's like 3 or something, 2. So I don't know, colleagues. Yeah. When did? No. Our invitations are like 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks old. I received the letter dated yesterday this morning. You see, it's this problem of not taking things seriously and this last minute very flippant approach to parliamentary process. Oh, ilabo, okay. So I'm saying I received the apology this morning, dated yesterday. Our correspondence is some 2 weeks old. For example, Minister Kumubele phoned me about the IFMS matter last week and this week, as I indicated, hence the deputy was here. Minister Dlamini Zuma of Women, Youth and People with Disabilities, they are due tomorrow. She phoned me last week already. I'm just saying there have been concerted efforts as an example of time use communication. But let's hear who's here. But yeah, okay. But let's just get an introduction and then.
Chair and honorable members, my name is Nomonde Mnukwa. I'm the Acting Director General of GSIS. And without really making the slide, okay, all right, okay. Yes, I'm with the three DDGs in the department. We have Ms. Terry Vandaya, we have up there Mr. Michael Curran, and we have
I ask that you come this side. Now, you were there for the purposes of space, sorry.
Okay. Then we have Ms. Rehomodizwe Mavimbela. Then the CFO next to me, Ms. Tobisa Soca.
Ms. Mavimbela is the DDG of?
Ms. Mavimbela is the DDG of Content Processing and Dissemination.
All right. You are acting for how long now?
I started on the 1st of July this year.
All right. All right, colleagues, there's the delegation led by the accounting officer. Again. Pungan, over to
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to the delegation, Chair. Mine will be just short to propose that we reschedule until we have executive authority. If we can't have the minister, at least one of the deputy ministers should be present. We can proceed. Thank you, Chair.
Liz?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's an order, but I don't think it can be open-ended. We said to, who was it earlier, DPSA, that we're the 30 days, let's get this thing done. And with it.
Yeah, okay. On this one, sadly, that's just the nature of it, because we have to take a decision about your budget, which may be a direct charge, as we've been repeatedly saying. And our outlook is that some of these things need the political leadership. As again, I'm sure you have been hearing things going on, and as has been explained by others. And I just think the final point is that there has to be a lesson in communicating with Parliament timelessly. We're not difficult people, by the way. We are generally very flexible where we can't find each other. We have postponed matters and delayed matters. What was that other one? We postponed from June, and then when we met with them, their current annual report arrived. So all I'm saying is that this is not acceptable. Completely and utterly not acceptable. Because if we allow an exception, we set into motion a precedent that will come back to bite us as a committee. And I think that unauthorized expenditure, and I'm just saying this so you convey it, unauthorized expenditure is a major element of the audit outcomes. So you would imagine that when you want something of this magnitude, because I mean people will go to values of it. It's not the value that's the issue. It's the outcome, and then the value follows. Now, the DMs are not here, the minister's not here. So I think that's why I started off with this intro, and I know that the acting DG really wants us to proceed, but I think we are not in a position to do so. We will reschedule. And we had dedicated this week, by the way, to unauthorized expenditure, because those guys, their treasury, are sitting on us here as well. They want us to deal with this thing of unauthorized expenditure, because they can't have an open-ended process as well. And it's on, we've met with them and they've briefed us. So if we can meet with everyone else, we can meet with the presidency as well. So we will find a date. And then we will reconvene when we reopen from the recess. It's a 1 week recess, so we'll find a date soon.
since they are here, if they can have a conversation with their ministry to check as to whether is there no deputy minister available for tomorrow. Tomorrow I was still sitting here. At least we could give them a space tomorrow. They are here as well. Maybe they could find that probably suitable for them if that's the case.
It's fine, I'm amicable to that. If you can find a deputy minister, we will slot you in tomorrow. No Sindelubab song. No Sindelubab song. So if you can find a DM, oh, 2. It's not 1, 2. Omunye ngifly in nice so get izo. Shuthu kwenye i2 song what. But again, do those things knowing that your audit outcomes require attention and they are processed here. So it's fine if you will communicate with the secretary to have a chat with Ms. Kabinde, and then you will advise if they are available. We've got no problem slotting you in tomorrow. In fact, tomorrow we've got a longer time because the house sits at 3, so it may be even to your advantage. So also we won't treat you differently. First come, first serve like we did today. So if you are here on time with your DM, we'll process you. Colleagues, is that agreeable?
We really appreciate it, Chairperson.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Acting DG and your team. Colleagues, tomorrow, system is 8, no more 9 o'clock. I think we can do 9, colleagues. We can keep 9 o'clock. All right. We will reconvene tomorrow at 9 o'clock to finalize the schedule of unauthorized expenditure that's been presented to us. And then what departments tomorrow? So it's minerals and energy, transport, basic education, women with persons with disabilities, and GCIS. That's the full schedule for tomorrow, colleagues. We invite you to lunch, but it will be available at 12, Sistombi? At 12 o'clock down the passage in the Marx building. Colleagues, meeting stands adjourned. Take care. Good morning. Oh, good morning. Good afternoon.